Black like me. Black like me. Black like me.
You're listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G., a podcast that invites you to experience the world through the perspective of one black man, one conversation, one story, or even one rant at a time. Here's Dr. G.
Hey, good people. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G. Let me just say, as I do at the beginning of each segment this season, I'm enjoying season 12. I can't believe that we have 200 plus episodes that are up, that we keep finding these exciting conversations to have and exciting conversationalists, people who either bring expertise or background or certain connection with me or the work. And it's just great to do this. As you know, because you've been listening, this season has been all about the launch of the Center for Black Excellence in Culture. Now, if you're new to this, there's a link in the notes so that you can find out more about this state-of-the-art space in Wisconsin that really is a one-of-a-kind type of entity in the region, in the upper Midwest region, where we are working to show how culture and Black space will actually play out to extend Black lives. That when we have a place where we belong, we see ourselves and we have this sense of representation, that it allows us to lean into our strengths, tap into our excellence, believe more in ourselves, build strategic networks. And when we do that, we make our community stronger, our dreams come to life, and we thrive in communities that aren't necessarily that conducive to Black thriving, like Madison, Wisconsin. It's a nice community. I've lived here my entire life, mainly. But as I'm finding more space that reflects me, it helps me to live a more full life, a more joyous life, and I believe that it will have an impact on my life expectancy. And so I'm excited to not only talk about the project, which I've been doing, and the people that took care of the design and the architectural drawings and the interior design and the marketing, but I'm also talking to people who have been on the fringes, who have been building relationships with me over the course of years, that helped me to take some very needed steps in getting this project done. And when you talk about something as major as the center, I feel that when you don't talk about the background and those various contributing components, you don't tell the whole story. So I want people to know that what happens when Black brilliance is on display, but I also want people to know what happens when folks who aren't Black but are certainly brilliant work with you and build relationships with you and believe in your dreams, the great things that can take place. And so I'm here to have a nice conversation with my friend Susan Pierce Jacobsen, who's an entrepreneur. She's run her own business. She's worked for a major multinational, if not major national insurance corporation. And we just found that we have we have synergy in our relationships and people we know. And we've just been able to lean into our friendship over the years, and it's opened doors to get a lot of cool things done for me. I'm excited to be introducing this friend to you. Susan, how are you doing today?
I am doing very well.
Well, I'm glad that we're able to have this discussion about so many good things that's happening in our community. And so just as a background, Susan, when people say, and I hate when I go to functions and they say this, and they say, so Susan, I know it depends on what season you're in. So Susan, what do you do? What do you normally say?
That's a great question. And I mean, right now I say I'm retired because I am. So that's, okay. I'm thankful for that. But I'm retired, but I do a lot of work in the community. And I've rarely answered that question in the last 15 years with where I worked. I've viewed myself as a little bit more of a community engager, I guess, and that's just one of the roles that I've taken most seriously. So I've had many jobs, as you know, and we probably will bring some of them up today when we talk about the history of the center. But really, for me, being engaged in the community is where I've spent a lot of my, I would say, important work.
Sure. And that must give you great joy because you've done it so well and you've done it for a good period of time. It's not like someone's forcing you to do that. And so it must feel good to know that you've used just a good part of your energy in your career and giving back to the community.
I've certainly tried, yes. I think I learned that from my dad. So that's a good, that was always there was always my business life, which of course we need to have jobs for our livelihood. Sure. But the second part was my community work, which fortunately you can choose things that are meaningful to you.
Definitely. Now, Susan, you and I met, I can't even remember the year, maybe it's 2014 ish.
Or 15, yep.
Yes, I had written an op-ed piece called Justified Anger that many of our folks know about. And then after doing that, I started, people started asking, well, what do you want to do to make the community better? And at that point, I was really growing as a thought leader. I wanted to get feedback on what I thought the community needed. But we had just purchased 0.9 acres of land next door to our church. It used to be a 12-bay car wash that was called Whale of a Wash.
Yep.
And we got this idea that if we flattened it, we could do something that was good for the community. I forget the name of this leader. She was the first female assistant basketball coach in the NBA. She was putting money into dream courts, creating basketball courts in what people thought were inner city spaces. And we had been selected. Some of her friends or colleagues said, we know this guy Madison, he's getting things stirred up by what he's talking about in terms of race relations. He found that he has almost an acre of land next door to his church, and maybe they could put a dream court on it. We thought about this and we said, hey, it could be a basketball court, but it could be also a soccer field. We called it Field of Dreams back in the day. We thought that we could put a clubhouse in it so that kids could sell concession or do homework. But there's this big vision about how we get back to the community. And I partnered with someone who's really known for doing some really good fundraising in Madison. And she said, we've got to go to American Family Insurance. We reached out, connected up with the person who was in charge of community relations. We went to the front desk. They picked up the phone and said, let me call the person who you're here to see. And you came down. I think that's the first time we met. So that was, you think 2014, probably 2015.
I think 2015. And yeah, I think it was 2015, Alex. And the other piece of that, I guess I recall distinctly, is it was Jim Hagenbarth from Park Bank that emailed me and said, you're going to get this call and you need to meet with Alex G. And I didn't even really know Jim well at the time, but that was a great conversation. Like you said, it was about a soccer field. And I think you even called it the Field of Dreams.
Yes.
Everyone that knows American Family knows that the Dream campaign was well intact by
Exactly.
then. Yeah, so that was the first meeting, and it was, it's amazing to walk in here today. I didn't come to the open house, as you know, I was out of town, but to see the facility, and remember us, the three of us sitting at a little table in the rotunda, looking
Right.
at the plans for a soccer field with, I think, a concession stand so kids could learn that responsibility.
It did
and
have that.
Maybe an after-school
Yes.
place to do homework. It's pretty amazing, right?
Yes.
It's pretty amazing.
And so folks will find, you'll understand that the center is actually the evolution of that dream that started off as just something on 0.9 acres. But Susan, let me just ask, in that role, how many meetings like that you have, sort of cold calls where people were really coming to you and AmFam for money from the foundation? Was that like half of your day to come downstairs and sit and talk with potential partners?
Well, I think in that case, that was a lot of my day, the team that I worked with to review the grant request or to work with community proactively. I think American Family's always done a really nice job of working proactively with community members. So yeah, that was a lot of my day. To take a meeting for a project that became this, that was not a normal part of my day. I will say that. And shortly after I left AmFam and your relationship with them continued, that you kept talking about your dream as it changed and evolved. But yeah, that was a pretty exciting day. I know I went back upstairs and went into the VP of the department's office and said, you need to learn about this. Other people need to know about this.
I appreciate that.
Pretty amazing.
I wonder if for folks who work in corporations where their job is to partner with community folks, how nerve-wracking those meetings are. Because you probably would say, well, I'm not daunting. People shouldn't be intimidated. But when you drive up, first of all, American Family is far from the south side of Madison. It's like a 20-minute drive. Then once you get to the grounds, you got to know where you're going. It's a beautiful, beautiful campus. It's their national, if not world, headquarters. As a nonprofit leader, when I would go into those spaces, I never really thought about the relationships that would develop between the decision makers and myself outside of that space. I was representing an idea. They were representing this big corporation. And that's a big thing. And I'm just wondering, are you aware, as a past funder or part of the funding team, just how intimidating sometimes it was just to drive up to a big office like AmFam and say, I've got an idea. And I felt like it was a Shark Tank moment. I have an idea and I hope you come in and invest with me.
I'm sure it is. I don't know that I ever really consider myself intimidating, but anyone that worked on that team You're right. It would be like a Shark Tank moment. I think it's pretty easy to get behind a good idea, Alex. And I was lucky in that same time period. And you know this because we're friends. That same year I met Kaleem Care, who has been a pretty strong part of my life. And when I decided to leave American Family, gave me my first consulting contract to work with him. So the stories that came in and the projects that came in that were compelling and I was able to spend time on, it was awesome and fun and a lot of other, day-to-day work in between of reviewing, smaller grant requests. But American Family does a great job on that still. I mean, they do. They really get ahead of it in the community and are involved in projects that matter.
They're good. They're
no
good
question.
to the community.
Yeah.
And I just want to let the listeners know this is not an American Family sponsored podcast, but they are friends and have been supportive of our work. But I love talking about that particular context because that's when and how.
That's our origin story.
That's our origin story.
For all the work that we've done together and for our friendship and that
Definitely.
meeting is, and then I think we continued getting to know each other because I worked with Kaleem and you were the chair of the One City Board.
That's right.
At the time.
That's right.
Yep.
So our paths continued to cross. It also reminds me that Madison is such a prime example of what 1 or 2 degrees of separation are, what it is and how it works, because I didn't think that I would bump into you into another context, but we actually had more conversations around those board meetings and around One City than we did at AmFam. But back to when you were the community person, I was touched by a couple of things. One, your connection to community issues, because you said, didn't you write something about anger? I can't remember the exact question. You said, aren't you doing something else besides this? And I said, well, I'm a pastor. And you're like, well, no, something else. And I said, well, yeah, I'm the founder of the Justified Anger Coalition. You said, I think my boss wants to talk to you about that. And I remember laughing with my friends when I came home. I was like, because I was getting pushback from, why are you using anger? You're doing well as a black male. You live in Fitchburg, your wife, your daughter. Well, my daughter didn't have her degree then, but like you've had these experiences. Why would you want to talk about hardship in Madison? And so when you told me your boss, I think my boss wants to talk to you about some of that work. I remember thinking, I don't think your boss wants to talk to me about that. But you actually said it a second time. You're like, yeah, that sounds very familiar. I think that my boss wants to connect with you around that. And 2 things happened out of that space. I won't necessarily say the name of the person that came with me who was sort of helping to open the door, but the 2 of us met and we presented, and you did come back favorably and said, we know this is in the early stages and this is not exactly what you're asking for, but we want to give some seed money in this project. But you said to me, but I want you to know that we are responding to you and your dream, and not because you had a real well-known, and this was an older white woman, not because you had this other person with you who was doing this spiel. We want you to know that we are responding to you and your vision. That was really, really important for me, because up until that time, people said, that's who you got to work with. When I think fast forwarding that now I've raised $32 million, but since that time, I've also had to raise $10 million for Nehemiah. So around $42 million. And to think that one day I was in someone else's shadows thinking, this is the person that's got to bless my foundation work or my fundraising work. That message of why you all were making that decision, and particularly such a general, it wasn't like a programming grant. It wasn't like, all right, come back and tell us how many uniforms you bought or how many kids you recruited. It was a planning grant to begin to put the Field of Dreams vision together. And that's important. And I'm saying that because I want my listeners to know that I probably went in asking for, I don't know, $250,000. I don't know what it was. But sometimes just because you don't get what you ask doesn't mean that you don't get what you need. And then Susan and I will stay connected over the years. We'll get into how that more specifically impacts the work of the center. But see each opportunity as an open door. And if you don't get exactly what you're asking for, it doesn't mean that something else good won't come of that. So send your thank you notes and connect with people and be cordial when you see them again. But I just have to underscore the fact that Susan said that to me, and that was really encouraging. And then I did follow up with her boss, who I think Kenan, a mutual friend of ours, helped to, I said, hey, Susan, somehow I mentioned that I'd heard about this gentleman. I wanted to meet him. And so we got it set up, and I, let him know that I first found out about him through Susan. And he had given me a half hour so that we can meet, because this guy is really, really busy. 2.5 hours later, we're still talking at Perkins Family Restaurant. We're laughing, we're connecting, we're finding things that we have in common. And in a few minutes, I'll just talk about how that really opened some doors to really get the Center for Black Excellence in Culture built. But again, it started from a visit to your office and a word of encouragement from you that you told a story well, you hold a very good vision, and we are responding to you. That was a powerful moment, Susan. You probably don't even remember saying that to me.
Well, I mean, I guess I do and I don't. It's funny because that is a very similar story that Kaleem would tell about our relationship with him early on in One City. And I think the interesting piece is I took the meeting because it was you, and somebody said you needed to meet with Alex. I didn't know who you were bringing with you. I don't remember you asking for a specific dollar amount, so that's intriguing. I'm sure you did, because most people would come in and have their ducks in a row and know what they're looking for. But yeah, I mean, there was a lot of good conversation, I think, at AmFam at the time, too, about the work that you were stepping into and that you had done for years, quite frankly. So good timing.
Sure, definitely.
Glad I took the meeting, right? So
I'm glad you did. And I'm glad your boss did, because we actually became friends. And then he and I stayed in touch. And then I mentioned to him that we had created a U.S. Black History course. And it was available to not only individuals, but corporations. And I think he paid for 20 executives from AmFam to come to this 9-week in-person course that began in February and went through early spring. And he brought, like the VP of HR and a couple of other folks. It opened doors to really get things going. And so he got a chance to see my heart. And then AmFam ended up giving us dollars to fund that U.S. Black History course. And so I'm still just watching how these pieces are coming together. You know, when people talk to you about fundraising, you do it for nonprofits as well. It's about relationships and connections. But Susan, it really is. It does come down. It's not like a magical pitch. It really is how you connect with people. And I think people belittle the importance of that.
I think that's probably true. And in our case, I think also how we developed a relationship outside of that role that I had, and it continued when I left. And should we get into the next part of the story? Okay, yes. I'll get into the next part of the story. We'll see how we both remember things. So then I think I left AmFam in 2016. Mm-hmm. Your relationship was very solid there. I did a little consulting work, and then 2017, 2018, I joined JLA Architects.
Yes.
And to me, this is really where the story changes. And was hired in kind of an interesting role. Joe Lee is a friend and kind of was going to do some part-time work, help him with some HR projects, do a little community work. And I guess I'd sit and listen to the project roster every week, and then finally one day said, I have somebody you should talk to. Same, 3 people at the Starbucks on Monona Drive. By then you had a plan for a building. I remember that. Another firm had done a plan for a smaller building. We were past the soccer field stage, and we met with Joe. And I think Joe was really encouraging. I think he's another person for you that I still remember you saying to me years later, he just told me it could be done. And we just kept the conversations going. So I think that introduction to JLA was another pivotal piece of the project that really started to put this together. And the JLA had a Black architect, a Black designer that could work on the project. I think with having Rafiq starting to get involved within, I think, just a couple months even, it just kind of maybe started to change the dialogue a little bit too.
Oh, my goodness.
So,
yes.
Yeah, so I mean, and for me, we talked about this a little bit when I came in and did my tour today. So much of our relationship our friendship has really been rooted in, we share our connections for the common good.
Yes.
Do I share my connections with everybody? I don't. Do I get asked to go to meetings sometimes and pitch something with somebody? I do. And do I choose to do it? Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. This is an important project. I mean, it's a big deal. So so I think that the entrance of JLA, and that was just fun to see. I mean, I was there. I retired in the end of 2022, but to be there and see, well, how many different versions of the building we would see,
Too many to remember.
And how it just changed and evolved as more people became involved in the community. More voices at the table, more dollars, of course, that changed the scope of your project, but pretty amazing when we think about that. Oh,
yes. As I reflect back on that interaction, I remember telling you and I seem like we're always talking at either Starbucks or Panera Bread, but I think we're talking about at Panera Bread one time about how I saw you as a networker extraordinaire. And I know that that's sort of a difficult, nebulous space to be in, because how do you contract or how do you build a business around networking? But Susan, you just did that. Yeah, if you ever decide to come out of retirement, you've got the knack for it because you also introduced me to the woman who actually became the president of American Family. Talisa Yancey. Yeah. And you said, you know what, I think you need to meet Talisa. Now everybody knows who Talisa is because she's the woman, she's up there, she's like number 2 in this whole corporation behind Bill. But you put me in touch with her when she wasn't quite in that role. She might have been the chief
marketing officer.
Chief marketing officer.
I would guess, yeah.
You must have spoken to Talisa also because I got a call from Talisa saying, hey, I'm at a place for coffee and I thought we were supposed to show up. And it was a crazy time. I think I was dealing with my mom's dementia and my world was crazy. And Talisa knew I was a pastor. She said, now, I know you're a pastor. I know you're a man of God, so I know you don't just blow people. No, you don't just blow people off and not show up at meetings. I was like, all right, stay there. I'll drive. I'm in Fitchburg. It's like 20 minutes away. And I drove, we had coffee and we hit it off and we became friends because you offered that grace because the meetings were set up, but my world was so crazy. I didn't know up from down. So that's prior to connecting with Jolie is that you wanted me to connect with her, but it's just such a seamless handoff. But with Joe, the three of us met for coffee, and I found out that he was from Madison. He went to Rival High School. He went to La Follette. I went to Madison West. And we really didn't have – we had an old plan, but no designs for the current building. And I remember saying to Joe, by being Madison guys, we need to step up to the plate and do something to address these issues. And so I'd love to see how we could work together. And he was open to it. He then came to my office and met Jim Bauer. Jim's been a friend for years, and he was my project manager. I'm like, my jaw hit the ground when Jim talked with Joe and said, we don't really have any startup money. Would you consider doing this pro bono? I had second person, whatever the embarrassment is when it's not you directly. I got so embarrassed. I had an out-of-body experience, but it was my project, so I couldn't leave the room. I couldn't excuse myself. And, Joe has sort of a laid-back,
right.
demeanor. He was like, yeah, I think we could probably do that. So I was thinking, okay, poor Joe. Did he feel pressure? Did he think, oh no, I'm a racist if I don't do like was he under? I almost wanted to follow him out to his car and said, I'm sorry. My friend gets a little, aggressive sometimes, asking people to do stuff for free. Yet Jim and I were doing stuff for free. You were networking with me we were all doing stuff for free because it was just an idea. But Joe followed through, and I remember my buddy was in the room. He's a community activist and a pastor in New Jersey. So he's a Korean American guy. And so after Jim left and Joe left, my friend Peter said, Alex, did that white guy just ask that architect to design this building for free? And I said, I think that just happened. He said, I need to talk to him. Will he come to New Jersey? Will he work with other groups? So we were just sort of dumbfounded that there was a part of business that we just weren't aware of. That if I asked for something pro bono, I would feel embarrassed. Like I was asking for a handout or something. And that wasn't how Jim saw it, and it wasn't how Joe saw it. They saw the need, the necessity, and the importance of the project. And I got to tell you, Joe's response, without saying, let me get back to you, let me check with my team, let me come back, for him to kind of shrug his shoulders and say, yeah, I think we can probably do that. That put a pin in something for me that said, Alex, you're onto something. This is not guilt. This is not fear. No one was trying to twist Joe's arms. You need to lean in and understand you just might be on something with this concept for this center.
Well, and I mean, I worked for Joe for years, and full disclaimer, I've got a little history of working for people that are friends. Joe's a very good friend of mine, and he just gets it,
yes,
right?
He does.
He gets it.
Yes, he does.
Joe and Erica understand how they can be impactful in a community. I often laugh and think I did get him involved in a couple community projects and I think the other one there was a good element of pro bono too, but. Mm-hmm. But in the end, it's worked for everybody. I mean, this is a beautiful showcase of JLA's work.
They do beautiful work.
And, when I started at JLA, it was a lot of mixed use, the apartments with the coffee shop and the restaurant and the hair salon downstairs. So I think it was an exciting and pivotal project for JLA too. And I might even go so far as to say it's projects like this that probably helped JLA diversify our workforce when I was there.
Oh, I bet. Well, because they ended up working when I went to my first planning meeting, Rafiq walked in. It's like, oh, I didn't know that there's going to be another black guy here. What's he doing here? Because, you're so used to being in these circles where there's no one, you're the only black person. When Joe introduced him as the new architect, I realized Joe had never mentioned that because Rafiq had not been hired when Joe and I had met. So I now know, because Rafiq and I are friends, he said, like one of his first days, Joe said, I got a job for you. Now to fast forward, knowing that Rafiq is getting awards and recognized for this beautiful work and this amazing design that he's done. But when he walked into that room, it made me say, Joe is taking this seriously. Because when I talked to Rafiq, I'm not going to have to translate. And when he said, he didn't wait for me to say it. When he said, I really want this job to exude this sense of the Black aesthetic, I just thought, this is crazy. I never dreamed that I would have an architect who could not just take the concept and build it out and help it to manifest, but he could do that with a sense of cultural appropriateness and cultural sensitivity, and understanding and leaning into the power of culture and building it, because he says, I need space like this in Madison. That was a complete game changer. And we didn't see that coming when you and I brought Joe in.
Rafiq is a total transplant, right? Like he's not
Where's he from? Florida? Right.
Miami, I believe. Miami. Yeah. And went to school different places. So he's lived in other bigger cities. And it's interesting. I mean, I've never heard you share that story of how Jim Bauer asked that. I mean, I know that conversation took place, but I find that interesting that you thought if you were the one asking, it would be like a handout, right? And then,
that was changing for me too.
Yeah, I mean, so that's interesting. And then, Jim's just not afraid to put it out there. And, I think those community projects that I would present to Joe, I always knew there'd be an element that he was just going to get on board and do. But he always took me up on my suggestions for community projects. Absolutely.
But that too,
and that's
Susan,
great.
says a lot about you, though.
Well, and that says a lot about he and my relationship too, right? I mean, we have a good relationship, and I think that you do call me a networker, and you might know that's always a little source of contention for me. I never consider myself a networker, but because I always think it feels transactional, I like to think of myself as more of a connector. And you're right; it's not something I've ever been paid for. It's just something if I can do and I can introduce people that have a commonality or a reason to connect, it seems like the right thing to do. And in this case, it is. It's a great example and a lot of great people. I guess I forgot to introduce you to Lisa. That's a good reminder too.
You definitely did. And I mean, I don't take advantage of networks, but we connected. I could text her. I could call her. She was one of the earliest Black donors on this project, but it's because you made that connection. And not only did you make it, she initiated with me, because when she called and introduced herself, I knew her name because you had mentioned it, but I was shocked that she had my number and was calling me because
it's good.
I was currently standing her up for a coffee appointment.
Like I said, I don't remember that. That's
well,
funny.
I'm glad. I try not to, and I hope to have that Lisa doesn't remember it either.
We'll see if she listens, and she'll let you know.
Particularly if she's doing that pastoral part. As a pastor, I know you're not. I know you're not gonna make an appointment and not keep, which has nothing to do with being a pastor, which was funny and fun for me that she would say that. There's an odd power differential between nonprofits and for-profits in Madison. Even though we're a community that really practices or talks about being progressive, in the nonprofit world, we only talk to for-profit folks if it's about a golf outing, buying a table at our event, giving an in-kind donation, or giving dollars. We haven't really worked to move outside of that space. Joe is completely approachable, and I feel like I teed up the conversation when I said we as Madison guys should do some things. I probably was thinking pro bono, but I don't really know what that meant. Like, I didn't know if that meant a discount or he'd do some preliminary sketches so I could take it out to funders to get money. But like Jim was real specific, because Jim had worked on the East Capitol District. Jim had worked on other projects before. So Jim said, we need some support for maybe like, and I don't remember the amount of time, the first 9 months, the first year, but like Jim like laid it out that this isn't just like drawing something on the back of a napkin. We need you to really design this so we can then take it to potential donors to get money. And if we make money, we will pay you. But if we don't, oh well. That part, I couldn't even imagine asking someone. Like, I would promise probably my left ankle, like, okay, I will make sure, if nothing else, I will pay you back. But Jim just made it very plain, this is really the planning dollars, and we hope that we can get there. We believe we've got a project, but just please know that if we don't, deal's off. Like, we're not going to have any way to pay you. And Joe Lee nodded his head and said, okay, because he believed in the project. It wasn't because Jim put pressure on him.
Right.
It's sort of like the person I was with, my first meeting with you. You made it very clear she did the ask because that's what she was known for, and she was going to be my co-chair of that fundraising committee. I didn't know that you could ask an architect or anyone in the business community what Jim asked so thoroughly and so clearly and so unflinchingly.
I think you sell yourself a little short there, because you did kick the can around with Joe at that Starbucks. I know Joe and I left that meeting knowing whatever work JLA did was not going to be paid. I'm 99% sure of that, because
He might have told you. I don't think I knew.
I mean, as somebody that was getting paid by him, I'm always thinking someday I'll find a project that, there's actually not all upfront pro bono work, right? Kiddingly. But think about it. You did, and I think even
Thank you for that.
And clearly you've done well with it. I mean, now you just explained to us that you raised $32 million and another maybe $10 million for Nehemiah in that same time period. So $42 million is nothing to sneeze at. So I think some of us ask more directly and some ask more, you just testing the waters a little.
Sure.
But yeah, I think it was pretty obvious that there wasn't a high budget to have some plans. But I think in the beginning too, it was a pretty low investment probably as far as time went to just see how far this could go. And then there were just pieces that started to change. As you met with more people, as you had a designer come on that was a black designer, I just think the project changed minute by minute, quite frankly.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know what? There's so many intricate pieces that cause something so successful to take place. And that's why this series is so important to me, because I'm talking with folks who, like Jim was in that room with Joe, but you weren't. But you were in the room with me at Starbucks, but Jim wasn't. So I'm hoping that each of you will be able to listen and say, I didn't know that happened pursuant to my meeting, or I didn't know that that's where that discussion went, or that it sparked a thought in the heart and mind of my friend Peter, and he and Jim are still, in conversations about community projects. I like to unpack stories because people think that you just pull the magic lever and things just happen, and they don't know that it's a series of meetings and a series of conversations. Just like you mentioned, I keep reminding you that I see you as a connector, but in those days I did not see myself as a fundraiser or as a person who could really be assertive in asking what kind of support I needed, for fear that it would sound like it was too much, or, well, why don't you have the money to pay for drawings? And Joe never said that, but I always thought, I didn't know developers did this. I don't know how people got to development. I just thought they had an in-house architect and they knew how to go onto CAD drawings and spit out, some designs, and then you market it and people buy it. I learned this whole new process. And so I also want people to know, who are listening, you may be or know people who are business owners or industry leaders who are trying to bridge the gap or build cross-cultural relationships. And I didn't sit down with Joe and talk about race. I didn't sit down and talk with you ad nauseum about race. We talked about things we held in common. And I think sometimes we have a misstep of really building true bridges because we make it more difficult by trying to fix or discuss things that will just sort of come out in the wash if we find something in common to work on. Because that was many years ago. Like you said, 2016, it's 10 years later, and we're still talking about connecting or seeing each other and how's your family doing and all of these kinds of things. And so I want people to understand that let's not make nonprofit and for-profit relationships more complicated than they need to be. Let's not make cross-cultural relationships more difficult than they need to be. That if there is a vision that's compelling enough, and apparently this was and is, it cost a lot of people to come to the table and put skin in the game. And that makes me extremely proud.
Well, I mean, and stay involved, right? I think the fact that we've got a 10-year long or more relationship, and then there's just other people within our reach. Mm-hmm. Jim Bauer's a great example because I don't know if you remember this. I mean, Jim Bauer's one of the people that when I met after I'd left AmFam was instrumental in mentoring me in my consulting work.
I forgot that.
It wasn't much more than a couple coffee meetings, but he's fairly direct, as you pointed out. So it was pretty easy for him to sit down with me a few times and kind of steer me in the direction of what that looked like. I think it says a lot about you, though, as well, just how you draw people in and stay connected. Mm-hmm. There's still a lot of good work to do in Madison, and quite frankly, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But it says a lot about how you do that.
Sure. There's so much uncertainty in the world right now, but I love that sitting down right here in front of this mic and letting the hard truths rumble out of my heart and off my chest is as certain as it ever was. When I reflect back on all of the seasons that we dropped here at Black Like Me podcast, Each of them has had a special purpose, a one-of-a-kind lineup of guests, and its own unique field. I also think about the thread that binds them all together. What we do here at Black Like Me is unique. I don't have another space that feels just like this, where I can really speak from my unique perspective. And the guests who have on the show remark that these interviews they do here are unlike any others that they've done in other places. Sure, nobody else does Black Icebreakers, but that's only part of it. We have created a truly unique space here where honest conversations about the thoughts, the ideas, the policies that affect Black people and that Black people care deeply about. And you know what? It isn't easy. And I don't do this all alone. I have an incredible team that has steadily grown over the years, and each person that joins adds another asset to what we can do here. And all of you that support us on Patreon, my people, my people, my people. We simply would not be able to do what we do or get what we have gotten without you. So as we look to even bigger and better things in the coming season, please help support the show right now by clicking the link to Patreon in the show notes and join the community of people supporting this unique and provocative space. In the world that we're living in, where there's so much attack on our perspectives, our history, our bodies, and our lives and contributions, aren't you glad you have a place where you can still hear powerful, exhilarating, intellectual Black thought like you do? I enjoy it. And so if you do too, share the good news, tell friends, click that Patreon link now. Thank you so much for your support of Black Like Me podcast with Dr. Alex G. Susan, I consider myself a storyteller. I do that in the pulpit at church. I do that here in the podcast and in other places. I like to dabble in writing. But what's so beautiful about being in this position of heading this wonderful space, we're getting lots of good attention around the state, is that I get to tell the story of how vision happens and how relationships are built. And so my relationship with you was not my first AmFam relationship, like going way back to Bob Cook. I mean, is it okay that I say that your dad was the president of American Family at one point?
Yeah, he was the president.
After, was he right? Was he right after? He was after Dale, right?
He was after Dale. So Bob Cook and then Dale, and then it would have been.
Then your dad.
Yep.
But Bob was of course on the scene. He was involved in the Madison Community Foundation, the Chamber of Commerce, but he was a part of creating Leadership Greater Madison, this program that brings emerging leaders together. I was in my 20s, and I was tapped for that. But Bob, he was the president and the chairman of the American Family Board. He was a marketing director when the American Family Insurance song was, because I remember singing it to him. I said, Bob, did you write that song? He goes, no, but I was the marketing director when it was approved. He gave me access to him. Okay, Alex, here's what you do. Here's what you don't do. Here's how you build this. And before I had a Nehemiah board, which is another company I created that's about 35 years old now that I've retired from, he was an advisor and allowed his name to be used in our masthead. I don't know if there are 20-something-year-old leaders of any background who could pick up the phone and call someone of Bob Cook's caliber. We just don't have those same kinds of connections. In the early 90s, I just think it was a little different. Madison felt smaller, but I just don't think a 20-year-old nonprofit leader could call up the CEO of Exact Science or Epic. They would certainly be gracious to people if I were in a place with Judy, whom I don't know, or let's just say Kevin Conroy, who I do know. If I introduced him to someone, he would be friendly and cordial because that's who he is. But I'm not going to give that person Kevin's direct number at home. But I could call Bob and Phyllis at home and get together and have lunch and talk and process. So for me, that was a part of my leadership development that happened. 92, and the center didn't start really moving into design discussions until 2016, 17. That's a huge gap. And then, of course, he introduced me into his broader circle. And so if you know Bob, then you knew some of the other people, Gary Schaefer and Gary Wolter and Jane Coleman and some of the other people that were just out there in the community. That gave me tremendous access so that when I had an idea, and the Center for Black Excellence and Culture was not my first idea, I could get people to listen because of those relationships. So I'm also hoping that people that are listening, my followers and our listeners, it's not like a golden parachute where there's just one person that you connect with. But if you do it well, and Facebook taught us this, there's a network of networks. But I just learned that there are good and accessible people in the community who made themselves available to me. And I took them up on their offers to call them, to have coffee with them, to meet with them, to ask questions. And all of those things, now looking back, helped me to understand what gave me the stuff, the goods, to be audacious with this vision. And, rest Bob, Soul, and Phyllis's, they're no longer with us. I'm happy that I get part of telling his legacy, because to me, that's what made him successful. Not that he was an impeccable dresser and was sharp. Oh yeah, he was dressed. I would look at him and just like, Bob, I want to be like you when I grow up, like the suits, the cuffs, the shoes, the socks. Like as an older guy, he dressed like a Black Baptist deacon. Like he had dressing down to an art. And I knew that he wasn't doing that for everyone, but the fact that he was so gracious with his time was a part of helping me to take myself seriously. So I want people to know that when people do make themselves available, you'd better follow up, because if you don't, they're going to think either you misunderstood them or they understood your potential.
Right.
So when people give you emails or phone numbers, find an excuse or reason to do that. But I'm happy that in my work that I have this memory that I get to talk about the plethora of people who have stepped into my life that helped me to be ready when you introduced me to, your then boss, Jim, or to be ready when I sat in front of Joe. Those pre-centered things were really important. And so there's a saying in my faith and preaching world that you don't despise the day of small beginnings, that if you take the small things that you're given very, very seriously, they can really accumulate in a way that will open great doors for you down the road.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And I mean, it's a two-way street, right? I think about when I'm out in the community and sharing what I'm involved in at the moment. If somebody offers, of course I follow up, right? Mm-hmm. And was life easier when we had more time in person? It probably was. I mean, I know that we have to work harder at these sort of relationships, right? I mean, because it is, so much is seen on Facebook or via a text or an email, and it's like your time with Bob Cook, those are in-person meetings where he's introducing you to a real person, not just a group chat of some sort. I just think it speaks volumes. Your story's a good one, and this project's a good one of all of the people that you met along the way. And then, the people like me, it's a minuscule part of this project, but when you look at the people that had a little chapter where they could introduce you to a few other people, it's such an easy thing for someone to do, right? Share your connections if you have them.
Susan, I was in Napa, California, Northern California, a couple weeks ago. I was at an event. It's called Praxis. And they have for-profit and not-for-profit businesses that are basically taken through a process for a year through this organization that teaches them how to put their presentations together, how to pitch their presentations, and to build a strong sense of camaraderie among these founders. They don't refer to themselves as small business owners or nonprofit leaders, they're founders. And then they do have a true Shark Tank experience. They have to give a presentation in 4 minutes in front of some really cool foundations that fly themselves in to sit there and basically listen to these pitches. They were trained to say, if you were to give me X amount of dollars, I could expand my business or I could bring it to scale. The second was, if you have expertise in something, I could really use a conversation with you about how to franchise. But the third one was, please use, and they use the phrase redemptive imagination. Who's in your network who you could just give one call to and they could sit with me and help me to think about how to do a marketing plan? It wasn't, and they sort of implied that individual could be a funder that would be interested, but it was more specifically, who's in your network? And I could see people actually writing down ideas, because it was almost as if those of us who weren't funders were thinking, okay, well, I can't put you in touch with Acme Foundation, but I know someone who knows a little bit about franchising or about cross-cultural marketing. But I thought it was so ingenious to ask while they were on stage for the networks of people. I feel people either ask for dollars, well, that's what they ask for, but they don't really, your story has to be intriguing enough to want someone to share their network. And so I think sitting there and watching it, they asked that, so I won't say effortlessly. No, I won't say effortlessly. I'll say that. But they were so direct, but they did it unapologetically. But it made me realize how indirectly I learned to ask people for those kinds of connections. But I love the way they came right out and said, listen, there's really no 6 degrees of separation. It's only one. Do you know someone who could help me bring this app to scale? If so, you have my QR code in the booklet. Please see me during the break. I just thought that was just really cool to ask for that. And I think that that's why you've been so helpful in networking people, because they might not have been approaching you as a funder when you stepped away from AmFam, but you still knew how to network and put the right people in space together. But it was kind of cool to see that being baked into a pitch when it's something you had been doing for friends and colleagues for so many years.
Yeah, and I mean, in ways, when we look back to the meeting at AmFam, I guess it's nice our relationship took that turn, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, if it would have been a bigger check in the beginning, you can wonder, would there have not been further conversations, and what would it have been like? The value
Right.
of those connections, I think, for most projects, that's huge, to get the right people involved, and not just the people that can write checks, right? Because you can build a capital campaign and find that, and we know where to look, but to get people that can really get in on a project and do some work.
And I feel like I'm the beneficiary of that, because people did come alongside and really
or the
work
orchestrator, because you do keep it organized, which is good. I mean, you've kept a lot of relationships that have come up in the last 10 years related to this. And
definitely, that's very, very important.
Orchestrator is true, because I know the open house, I think one of your staff told me there were 1,532 people there that day. I mean, that's a lot of people that wanted to see this facility, and probably many of them that you had a conversation with at some point in 10 years, right?
I will say, and as the connector, you'd appreciate this, over 1,100 we had 1,500 people registered to come through. Over 1,100 of them were not in our database.
Wow.
So we increased our database dramatically, but that's again because of some of the in-kind partners like the Hebing Group. I had Dana and Dave from Hebing come in. I mean, 2 years, $700,000 worth of pro bono services, but the media blitz that they put on, the media that they attracted, the stories, doing things on Facebook really is helping us to reach this community. And so, I feel like I'm sort of beating this drum over and over and over, but people listen to this podcast to be inspired to think differently. And you have to look at some of the indirect benefits, the benefits of partnership that don't necessarily pay dividends or seem to be that relevant at this moment. They have a way of really paying out great dividends down the road, but you got to manage those relationships, be genuine in them. You can't be short. You got to be kind. So I just think that piece is important, because you have folks who work for foundations and everyone's trying to call them, and then when they're not in that position anymore, they can't get anyone to return a phone call. So I just think it's important that we treat people well, because we can just do so much good when we're together.
Right.
After JLA agreed to do the pro bono work for us, I found out that they were hired to do work with Cleam in One City. They were hired by Dr. Ruben Anthony at the Black Hub. I don't know if they did anything with any of the other community projects, but they became lead architect on like the 3 major Black-led efforts in the community. And to your point, which is what I'm sure you were hoping when you introduced me to Joe, it sort of positioned them as folks who know how to do this space, and people rant about their work. I think one of the coolest moments of working with Rafiq is that when we had our initial stakeholders community with Black pastors and the heads of Black sororities and fraternities, Rafiq was presenting and he paused. It's almost like he got emotional for just a moment. And Rafiq's kind of laid back. And so very, very even keel. So I was surprised that it seemed like he was choking up a little bit. And he said, "I'm sorry, I'm nervous. I've never presented to a Black audience before."
Right.
And I remember the room just kind of pausing, and people said, "Well, we've never had a Black architect present to us." But in that moment, and I think I've said that on a couple of podcast episodes, that was a magical moment, because I realized we don't even have community buy-in yet, but this setting is proof that we're hungry for Black excellence and for people to know each other. So here's this Black architect in town, having never really laid eyes on folks in that room except for the ones that might have been a part of his fraternity. And so it just shows that Madison, that's not a large community, you can come here and be a Black professional and not meet and see each other. Because had Rafiq known half of that group, because it wasn't a very large group, that wouldn't have been as daunting or pivotal at that particular moment. But because you put on your blinders and you go to work when you're a Black influencer or professional in this community because you want to do well, that sometimes you do that at the risk of really connecting. But in that moment when Rafiq did that, he became well known in the Black community as the architect that's going to bring this to life. And so we're going to have to give him keys. He's here like every other day. Like when I'm walking around, he's just walking through showing architects or co-workers or interior design. Like he's walking through giving tours, and he really should. But yeah, I need to give him an office or something because he is here all the time.
Well, I think it's a pivotal, and I don't want to speak for him, but I know Rafiq pretty well. I worked with him, and I think you're right. It was a pivotal project for him.
Yes.
And I think emotional is fair. I don't think he'd mind us saying that. I don't know the percentage. Somebody can Google it if they want to. There are not many Black designers in our country, Alex.
3% of all architects are Black.
Yeah, so that's a very
small.
It's a very small number, and to think that he's stepped into some of those other projects, and I think the other one is the Imagination Center at Rindell Park, the public library.
Yes.
That is soon to open. So, yeah, it is pretty amazing, and it ties back to your whole conversation around Black excellence. That I think Rafiq would give a good testimonial on.
Yes.
How he feels about this project and how it fits into his career.
Sure.
Definitely.
So, Susan, you've been a professional in this community. You had a career. You've owned business in this community. How are you hoping that Madison will be different for future business leaders and folks moving here than perhaps it's been for you and your non-white peers up to now?
Right. I mean, that's a big question, but I thought about it because I figured you'd ask me some question like that today, right? I mean, Alex, you know me well. I am a person who tries to do what I can. I try to stay educated. I try to read. More than anything, I think I try to listen and know my place.
Yes.
I like to talk. I can tell a good story just like anyone if we're at the Madison Club having a cocktail or whatever it might be. But really, I think listening and learning, and I think we've said it over and over today, finding common ground. The stark reality still is opportunities are different in this city for different kids. It doesn't make sense. I mean, we learn about this in very educated ways of different projects that are going on in this town, like One City Schools. I'll say that again.
Sure.
And, you're showing up for businesses too, right? Like giving businesses a space where there might be a co-working space. I just think we need to show up in better ways. Everyone that knows me knows that I'll talk about the not in my backyard mentality. Like everyone can show up with a good talk, but when there is something happening that is too close in their neighborhood or their purview, it's no longer something that someone likes. And I just think looking for the common ground, looking for opportunities, more education, which you do. I mean, you do so much work in that realm already to try educate white allies, right? That is a big piece of your work.
It's a passion of mine.
It's a passion of yours, and I just hope that. I mean, there's sometimes I nobody really likes the political climate in our country right now, and we don't want to get political, but I also want people to just pause and try make real connections and calm down sometimes and have a conversation, because you never know who you're going to talk to that might learn something or bend how they think a little or get involved in something they weren't involved in before. And like you said, when you came to American Family, well, I wasn't there to talk about this. And I kept saying, I think Jim wants to meet with you on this other topic. And it was the justified anger topic. And, and I think that's a piece of it too, is just having hard conversations. And, we're a university town. We should have good critical thinkers in this city that can help solve problems. So I still hope it looks different. I've seen some change, but I hope it looks different.
Definitely.
Than it does today.
And we want to be part of that change. And I'm hoping that one of the many reasons that you've leaned into this work and that you've been helpful is that if people who look like me, if Black people can have a sense of representation, can feel like this is a place that they can grow and thrive and do well and live better and not have a shortened lifespan just because of their ethnicity, that has a real impact on the broader community because we stay. We're not gone. And those Black role models are not just role models for Black children. Of course they are for Black children and Black people, but in our ever-changing world, we need Black role models to be role models for all children and all folks, because the world's changing. And if Madison can be a place where we learn to work together with different world views and different perspectives, that can be very, very helpful. But I think people often see Black role models as being there just for Black kids, but non-Black kids need to see Black people that are thriving and feeling a deeper sense of home. So my plan is that as the center does this work, there would be a tremendous ripple effect in the broader community, that revolving door where great people come in and they leave, that when people stay, we build this critical mass. The gift at the center is that it creates a new reality of what Black excellence looks like through the lens of Black people. Because I think that's really important. I think that's a great start, because when people come by who are not Black, they will look around and say, oh, this is what you're talking about. This is what Black excellence looks like. That it's not just limited to grade point average, but it's just our thought, knowing our history, and using culture as a way of really moving ahead. But as people feel a greater sense of home, that this can be a place where they can thrive, when we stay, we have a place where we can be our best selves, which means that at work or at play, we can give our best selves in the community. And that's the benefit that Madison stands to receive from all of this, that when we have a critical mass of Black folks who feel that Madison can be one of the best places in the state to live for everyone, including Black folks, that will change the landscape and the atmosphere for everyone. And I'm looking forward to being able to watch that play out in this community, to watch the whole community benefit for what's happening here at the center. Well, Susan, I'm really glad that you came by to talk with me. One, I mentioned earlier, I'm a storyteller, and it's just great to have a moment just to reminisce on how we got here and what were some of the key relationships. Because I think folks who are now asking me, how did you do that? How did you raise that? Even some people have jokingly said, can you give me your Rolodex? Well, I mean, it doesn't work that way, because you can call someone, but they won't necessarily take your call if you don't have that rapport. So I'm happy to be able to tell some more of the background. Like walking through the center today, you said you love seeing some of the background space behind the scenes. And in this series, I'm wanting to show the behind the scenes of the very meaningful relationships that helped me to get here. And when I talk to my friends, they always say, oh, no, I didn't do that much. This other person did, that other person did. But each of you did what you were supposed to do to help us to get here. So I just want to thank you publicly for your support, for your work, for the talks, and for the encouragement, particularly when you say, you know who you should meet, you know who you should talk to, you know what you should do. I am so appreciative that you didn't hold back on that. And that going back to that meeting in 2016, when I was trying to build a soccer field, I turned down $50,000 and people got pissed. They're like, how do you turn that money down? AmFam gave us $50,000 to plan. So I didn't lose anything. And then as this plan came to pass, AmFam gave us $2.5 million. So I also want to say you don't have to sell your soul and to do the thing you're not supposed to do because money's on the table, because resources will come when networks and relationships and vision are at play. And all of those were at play. So Susan Pierce Jacobsen, thank you so much for being a part of that and for the friendship that we've developed and the connection that we developed. And I love that you get to walk through and see what was just sort of a thought or a gleam in my eye in 2016. I'm glad that we both get to see the fruit of that initial conversation.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Me too. I mean, it was pretty special today to be in here, to walk through the door. And you're right, 10 years, and you should be really proud. And I'm happy I could be a cheerleader of the dream from the sideline. And
I appreciate it.
Thanks, Alex.
Sure.
Black like me. Black like me.
Well, thank you, folks, for listening to another exciting episode of Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G. And I told you that we've been having these exciting conversations, and today was nothing different. And so I'm really glad for my special guest. Hey, I just want to say to the folks who are listening, I don't bring this podcast to you regularly by myself. I'm flanked in the studios by Ariana and Eli, who are my producers, and they're my engineers, and they make sure that my guest and I sound really good when we come to you. And so I really appreciate them and their contributions. I also want to say to those of you that are part of my Patreon family, thank you. These are folks who give as little as $2 a month to other amounts. Thank you. Because of that investment, we're able to have quality equipment and quality space so that we can bring a quality podcast to you. So if you haven't yet done that, click the link. We make it very, very easy. And at certain amounts, you get automatic gifts and swag and things that we've designed. But even for as little as $2, you can join that family. So please consider doing that, particularly if you listen to the show regularly and you're getting things out of it. even though we've not been around for 12 seasons, we still would love for you to write reviews. And so if you're finding these reviews scintillating and insightful and they're motivating you, don't just keep that to yourself. Go to wherever it is you download this podcast and other podcasts and please write a review about what it is we are doing. The other thing you can do, and I'll say this lastly, is please share this out on your social media. Put a comment with it. Talk about why it's important. Share it with people who you think would really benefit from it. This is how we expand our listener base, and we would love for you to do that. So for all the people who listen to this podcast and make it fun and worthwhile, I appreciate you more than you realize. So thank you for being the best part of Black Like Me podcast with Dr. Alex G. Have a great day, and I look forward to next time.
Black like me. Black like me.